fireside chat really centered around creativity and technology as you think digital workflows from loan recovery with no code. Michael Myers held many titles from Chief Risk Officer to Chief Innovation Officer. He's got a master's degree from Georgetown University in technology, 20 plus years experience in this space. He's joined by Andy Zambito, who's the Chief Sales Officer at Creatio in the Americas. Really, in his role as well, leading a lot of these conversations as you start to talk about digital transformation at scale. So very excited for this opportunity to join you both. I will step back and let you facilitate that conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you doing that. And thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. As Tom had mentioned, I've had the privilege of working with Michael just about almost a year now. And, Michael's long, illustrious career has always been at the forefront of technology. We were just chatting prior to coming out here from, early days of in the military intelligence and using technology in that sense to now really being at the forefront in the debt collection space and being 21 years with MRS BPO. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure the audience is really looking forward to your insights today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So I have a series of questions. I'm sure we won't get through all of them, but because I'm sure you can expound on them for quite some time. But I'd really like to start with just understanding, in your perspective, how can financial services firms use digital platforms to succeed in this new age that we're in and we've been talking about all day so far?
Well, I think a lot of people know about the customer-facing aspects of digital technology. One of the hardest things for all companies, but especially financial services, because they deal with a lot of data. And one of the cool things about Creatio is the no and low code. If you think about it, most companies, IT was an island. And if you wanted to do anything, you had to go to IT. But with a tool like Creatio, all employees now can become business technologists, I think is the right term, or an analyst. They can get access to data, they can use data, they can actually help automate their jobs to be able to do things. So that is a huge enablement from an employee perspective. And on the back end, a lot of financial services companies are connected to a bunch of vendors, but often they're connected to a huge back end, kind of like monolithic vendor that's handling all of their processing. One of the promises of fintech was it was going to change everything. But that promise, until very recently, has not been realized. And really in the last year or so, you're starting to see major changes all over where technology is now layered on top of each other, almost like by a platform on top of a platform in order to accomplish something. So that particularly the digital enablement of a financial service company is truly seeing massive changes. You've seen all these different apps, all these new offerings come out to be, and all of that is possible through the digital technologies and enablement that's happening.
That's great, Michael. So I guess the inverse of that, I question your opinion of, what are the risks associated with firms that don't, adapt to this, that go the non-digitization route? What risks do you see?
I think history shows that when companies don't keep up with technology, when they don't embrace technology, or when all of a sudden they just sit on their heels and say, you know what, nothing's going to change. We'll let someone else, do things and we don't have to adapt. The digital technologies are enabling companies to adapt faster than others. So if you don't begin today, and if you haven't begun already, by not embracing digital technologies in multiple aspects of your business, you're going to be left out. As an example, if you only embrace customers, those companies that are embracing the changes for their vendors or other facets of the business, those companies will succeed. So those companies that don't adopt it, don't embrace it, and we saw this during the pandemic, right? Where companies that didn't spin faster, did not pivot faster, did not embrace it faster, they were left out when they saw their revenues decrease, and some of them went out of business completely.
Absolutely fair points. So, we get often asked about the adoption of the organization, the reaction to this. In your experience, was it easy or difficult to get organization-wide buy-in when referring to, of course, to these digitization initiatives that you've been speaking about?
Well, we began before the pandemic, and as did a lot of companies. And the pandemic, of course, everyone says, helped accelerate it. For us, we were several years in. We had begun the digital journey probably about 4 years ago, where we began all of the different customer outreaches, and we began changing a lot of our core infrastructure. The it's more like a snowball, right? You begin it, and you've got to get buy-in from all of the executives, all sectors of the company in order to do it. At first, it's not easy, and typically it might be driven by operations, it might be driven by IT, it might be driven by finance, it might be driven by, a specific vendor via a new contract. Whatever the initial driving force was, in order to do it right, it really has to be embraced across the company. So it's a hard discussion to begin, but it must begin.
Thank you, Michael. Let me go on to a little bit different topic. When you think in the larger spectrum of the digital age we're in now, are you seeing any downsides to it?
I would tell you that, the thing with digital is that, mistakes get magnified. It's very easy in the old days, you would make a change, and that change didn't necessarily have a wide-ranging ripple effect that the changes that happen now do. So the flip side to that is being digital enables a lot more different types of compliance, rules and regulations, technology to be in place. But really, I would say it's the magnitude of changes. It's really easy to have a wide-ranging mistake. And probably a good example of that is Facebook. Look what just happened yesterday. They
Too
made
soon,
a change.
too soon, Michael, too soon. Please.
It's one of those things, one little change can ripple all the way across and have a massive effect.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. We're all facing it in their entire businesses. I think we're down from that. So it sounds like obviously you're a believer in all this transformation, and so I'd like to talk about it in terms of something you mentioned early on was about aligning around customer needs. What would you articulate are the key focus areas for a digital leader that really they shouldn't miss if they want to ensure getting that kind of ultimate result, that maximum benefit around using this transformation to align customer needs?
Well, the old word is really omni-channel. You've got all these different mechanisms and ways to communicate to customers. And typically in the old days, those channels were not connected to each other. One of the great things that a tool like Creatio allows is the ability to connect all those channels together, allows you to understand the behavior that's channel specific. And let's face it, no customer communicates over one channel alone, right? It just doesn't happen. Customers communicate over multiple channels for multiple reasons. Whenever there's usually a real big problem, customers want to call, right?
Right.
And for transactional things, email might work, or a text might work for notification or a quick transaction. So, but other things, you may want to go out to a website, learn more, research more, look at histories of something and do it. But as time goes on, those channels all have different characteristics. And it's hard without a digital tool to manage all of those channels appropriately and to optimize them to enhance customer experience.
And I think, Michael, from some of our prior conversations, we've talked about it's not just that there's this omni-channel that you want to hit them in different areas, but that at different times, kind of the texture of that ongoing communication needs to switch channels back and forth seamlessly, as opposed to, I've started through chat, I'm only ever going to stay in chat, right?
Yeah, that's right. And really, I would use the word, it has to be choreographed.
Okay.
And that's where something like machine learning and AI helps you understand what is the best way to paint that canvas of customer experience so that the customer feels unique and they feel fulfilled, and most of all that you care, right? Because that's what
Yeah.
people want to feel it inside, that the company cares about them.
I'll agree with that. And you're bringing me to my next question, because you touched on some obvious, other technology buzzwords, AI, machine learning, and in your role, obviously, you're a technology evangelist. So what are some of those technologies that you believe will kind of be dominating the enterprise landscape here in the near future?
Do we have all day to talk about this?
Unfortunately, no, but we
I
can
could
talk
go
a
on
little.
forever.
Give us just
But
a couple insights into where your head is thinking, and some meaningful nuggets.
well, I touched on it before, but platforms are platforms. That's where things are built upon other technologies, and today that's becoming one of the most important facets of this digitization and ability to use digital tools like building blocks to accomplish something. That, I think, is critical. Businesses before were monolithic and they weren't really able to extend and flex and change and do it. So really businesses that adapt will become like Legos. You can change and rearrange and help it. That's something that's major. The other cool technology is called digital twins. This may not be something you hear a lot, but it's where you can, in essence, build a digital model of something. So if you wanted to figure out what that customer communication would look like, you would build a digital model of your customers and maybe even all the different demographics or whatever it may be, and kind of model it and play with it and see like what happens, what if. Or you could even build an entire digital capability of your business and then play with it and model it. I'll give you a real good example in banks.
Yeah.
We've all talked about fintech, and fintech kind of took one little piece, at a time, similar to a Lego block, and tried to do it. DeFi, or decentralized technology, said, you know what? Let's take that bank and let's digitize every single thing and get rid of the people and make it a complete intertwined capability. That is just an amazing technology that is incredible. So platforms are platforms, digital twins, DeFi, all of these are future technologies that are really incredible.
That actually sounds amazing. You're right. This could be a whole topic unto itself. So let's give, for those who aren't as far thinking and maybe are doing a little more catch up, what would be some thoughts or guidance you have about earlier stage machine learning or AI that you kind of mentioned before? If somebody's not as far in their journey to tackle those yet, are there some areas that you think would be some low hanging fruit or quick wins to get an organization on that path?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and I'll call it, the old days, you had analytics, and you had all of these different people that were necessary to kind of get a result. Nowadays, with the low code and no code, and like Creatio has the AI integrated with it, you're able to get data and to be able to play with it sooner. And because you can go out and grab data yourself and see it, you can take a look and look at it. So I would say start with the low code and play with it, grab data, see what happens. And a lot of the technologies are enabled directly within Creatio. And I think it was demonstrated earlier where you can always do like a Visio-like sort of thing and just draw it out there and do it. So that to me would be the way to do it, is to play with it and don't be afraid to fail. That's got to be the overriding most important technology thing with all of this data is, tools like Creatio allow you to democratize the data. And that means you get it in the hands of everybody. Everybody has access to it. And that's really the greatest thing, is to put that tool in people's hands so they can play with it. So the best place to start with it is get a tool like Creatio with the low code, no code. Let people play. Let them experiment. That's where the greatest benefit and value will be from this type of tool and technology.
I really love that advice. So let's stick on, I know we're running shorter on time now, so let's stick on that theme of advice. Earlier in the keynote, when we did a poll about asking people where they were in their journey, I think greater than 50% were kind of in that earliest phase. So you've just given some advice about kind of in the early days when they have a low code technology. Maybe you can give some guidance around how they can manage some of the internal kind of selling and consensus building around the leadership, and getting over that initial hump to where this is just part of their business and the way they think, since you're further into the journey than many.
So there's probably a lot of different ways to do it, but one of the easiest, depending upon what level you are in the company, and I think that to some degree, all companies now are becoming technology companies. And that's a realization that is beginning to permeate to all different types of industries. There's an old saying, software eats everything. And I think today that's very true. So probably what I would do is I would find articles that illustrate the person's point and the need to change in their specific industry, and forward it and say, hey, this company is doing this competitor is doing this competitor is doing that, and begin to increase that awareness that change needs to happen for survival, because companies that don't change won't survive. So knowledge is power. I would use other people's knowledge, because more than likely this individual or individuals or their team, they've tried to get the message out and they haven't been successful. Leverage other people, leverage other sources, get it out and show those articles to make a point to help them. Show the technology out there. And a lot of the technology to begin with is at no charge or free to try. Use it and make available demos and try it to prove your point.
So I do have, with the remaining time, I do have one question. I don't know to the degree that you're willing to share any of the secret sauce or anything that you're looking at for yourselves. But when I think of, you've been at this firm. MRS is not a new firm in the space, and you're doing evangelical things yourselves to compete. And instead of having fintech invade your space, you're innovating at a faster pace to kind of put barriers up to others. Maybe you can just share a little bit about how is MRS approaching this technology, and some of the exciting things in your future that you see for a space that many people might not be thinking about as the innovator.
So I'll tell you, Andy, it's a great question. And one of the things I think we do differently is we're not afraid. Most companies are afraid to fail. Most companies are afraid to try. One of our greatest hallmarks is we're not afraid to fail, and to fail again, and to fail again, and to fail again, until you achieve something. So I would encourage everybody to try something, do something, try the technology, play with it. I love that word, because as kids, we try things, we do things, we're not afraid. Use the technology, try it, test it, and don't be afraid to fail. Do something.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been a great talk. Let me turn it back over to our host. But one more time, thank you so much for joining us and sharing, Michael, your perspective. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions we'll have afterwards. And Tom, back to you.
Michael, again, echo his statement. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your mindset. Thank you, Andy. So as we transition on now, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're moving to the next part of this event here. Give me 1 second here. I believe Michael, I believe we're moving to one other piece of the event. I don't believe there's any questions. Let me just confirm before we let you go. Want to make the best use of your time. I love your mindset though around companies thinking more as technology companies first, and then getting creative, right? Like letting people get in there and challenge themselves and unlock the art of what's possible for you to your individual role. And it's very powerful stuff because nobody knows your role better than you do in your day to day, right? And it's one of those things where you know where change is needed, and being able to leverage that with clicks, not code, is so powerful. And that's why you're seeing that big shift. Let me just confirm with our team that there's no more questions. I believe there's not. Perfect. I will go ahead and share my screen as well. We don't have time for questions. I apologize, Michael. Again, thank you so much for your
Okay.
time. Expect a LinkedIn invite from me, sir, because I truly enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.